As I heard the song that day, I didn't hear so that you would remember my name. I heard him say, I put every star into place so that you would remember your name, so that you
Mm,
would remember who I designed you to be. And I just started bawling.
mm.
And I was like, I know who he is. I know who he is. And I've spent so much time developing my relationship with him. It's me. It's me that I have a hard time remembering. And it's me that I have a hard time reconnecting back to who I really am. And so to have this map where I can be like, okay, this is actually who I am in this beautiful, light, powerful way. This is who God designed me to be.
Welcome to the Light the Day podcast, where we explore spiritually transformative experiences. And today I welcome to the show my dear friend, Cytel Schults. Hi, Cytel.
Hi, Julie. Thanks so much for having me on. I just am so excited about this podcast. What an incredible topic.
It's going to be so fun. And I am so excited to explore your story because I love your story. I love what you do. So let's start there. Share with us what you do.
So I'm a sound astrologer, which is like, what the heck is that even? So I really have clairaudience. I have a gift of hearing, and I really help connect women to the power and the frequency of their authentic sound. Like our sound is a fingerprint for our soul. So there is not another one like it. You'll kind of hear somebody that's like sounds similar, but it's like fingerprints can look very close, but they are not identical, even for twins. And it's the same, like our voice is that print. And so I really help connect women to their authentic sound, because our authentic sound, can act as a magnifier for our words. Now, if we're not in our sound, then it acts as a muffler, and it kind of like goes over, I don't know if you've ever experienced this before. I've experienced this before, where someone will start talking and you can't hear a word they're saying because the only thing you can focus on is their sound. You're like, oh my gosh, either like really bugs you or it just sounds really funny. So it's just like that. And our authentic sound was designed to help support us share our mission and our message. And it's designed to help amplify that. And so that is like really what I love doing. It's a passion of mine to help women be heard.
That is so wonderful. And I know you didn't start there. Actually, when I met you, you were doing a lot of music interpretation, like lyric, like the music, like a song would speak to someone, and then you would go in and find the messages in the sounds in the song. On my previous podcast, Build a Life After Loss, I actually did two um, song interpretations for my show because of what I learned from you. It was so cool to just kind of look at the messages and see the underlying messages. And that's where I first found you. And I thought it was so fascinating to me. I've always been a music person myself. I really truly feel like music has been a huge healer in my life, a huge healer in my life in so many aspects. And so I love that. And a sound astrologer, we're gonna have so much fun talking about this. So I'm curious, what what how did you discover your ability to interpret songs? Let's start there. I just kind of want to start with your music story. Kind of share a little bit of your background, kind of how all this developed. This spiritual knowing, this clairaudience, this ability to hear things that nobody else hears.
Yeah, you share about the song interpretations, and I'm like, wow, I've just been doing weird things forever. Which
I can relate.
I know you can, and I really, really love. So, like, it all actually started a long time ago in a not a very far away land, very close to where I live right now. Um, I started learning about holistic healing, and a woman in my area asked me if I would teach her daughter voice lessons. And I was thinking, absolutely not. Like, I do not want to do that. No way, no way. And she said, I will trade you voice lessons for my daughter, and I will watch your daughter, who she was 3 at the time. She said, I will watch her twice a week for 2 hours at a time. And I was like, done, sold. Like, then I can get stuff done. She was 3 at the time. And with littles, it is
Mhm.
hard to get things accomplished. And so I started doing that. And I was really just only doing it for a couple of girls. And I was doing my holistic healing um, in another avenue. And then God said, I need you to start telling people that you can hear things when they sing. And I was like, you want me to straight up lie to people? Like, this isn't a God that I know. Is this God? He said, is this me? And I need you to trust me. So I would start saying that, and people would say, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And I would think, that would be so cool if I could actually do that. And then this wonderful woman who I just love and adore so much. It's actually my aunt and a very good friend of mine. She married my uncle. She's the one that taught me energy work and all those things. She said, can I do a voice lesson with you? And she came over to my house and she started singing for me. And I was like, I can hear things when you sing.
Oh, wow.
I could hear the emotional things that were stuck in her voice. I could hear thoughts that she was having that was making it difficult for her to have that like good supportive diaphragmatic breath that you need in order to hit a pitch properly and to be able to elongate your breath. Do you know what I'm saying? And I could just hear all of those things in her sound, and we were able to address the emotional roots and the mental roots that were causing her voice to express in that way, and her sound changed. And so it really kind of started from that place and with music. And I've always been a lover of music. And then again, just like one day I was listening to a song and I just started getting this download of a message. And so I took out pen and paper and I started writing it down. And it wasn't like, a lot of times are like, oh, I got this message from the song, and the words translate directly across to the message. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, you're like, oh, I can totally see how you would get that message from the music. I was getting things that I'm like, I don't even like, I'd read it again and I'd be like, I have no idea how I got that message from the song, but somehow they came together and it ended up being like exactly what I needed, and then exactly what my clients needed. It was the message. And then when they'd listen to that song over and over, they'd remember that message, and it would really help them step into that frequency of the expression of that intention that God wanted for them from that message. Did that make sense?
It totally makes sense to me because you did a couple of song translations for me, and it was remarkable. And then you actually taught at one point back in your far distant past, not really. Um, you actually taught a little class on song translation, and I had done a few for myself before you even taught that class. And then I had a friend reach out to me and she said, "This song feels like my business. Can you give me a translation of this song?" And so I sat down and I did that. Maybe I can, and, and it's just, and I love that you got that message from God. Like, you can hear in their voice, you can hear, and you just started to claim that even
Mhm.
though you weren't recognizing it yet, because I would guess that you were already hearing it, you just didn't know you were hearing it.
Yeah, I was. It was really interesting because even before I started saying it, like the girls that I was teaching, these were young teenagers, right? I was teaching them lessons, and I hadn't had more than 3 months of voice lessons in college. So by no means was I necessarily qualified to teach, which is why I didn't want to say yes in the first place, right? But for a trade, I felt like that was fair.
And I do have to add, you have a gorgeous voice,
Oh, thank you.
and you are a vocalist. So,
Thank you.
it makes sense that people are asking you to teach their kids vocal
Right.
lessons.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But it was really interesting because they would come, these two, they were two specific teenagers that I taught. They would come and they would sing, and I instinctually knew what to do.
Mm,
And I just thought, this is weird. Like, I should, and I don't know if you've experienced this before, but sometimes my husband will do stuff. And I'm like, how did you know how to do that? Like, he will build computers from scratch. He does electrical stuff. And I'm like, electrical is you don't mess around with that, but he just like rewires, like it just makes sense to him. And I had never experienced that. I was always like, how do you do that? Until those moments when I was in lessons with them. And then I was just like, I know exactly what's happening and I know what we need to do to fix it. And so then adding that energetic piece, like I'd been developing the gift of my intuition over here, on the left, and then on the right, I was working with a voice over here. And then when I put them together, like it was just a no brainer when it happened.
that's magic, and I just wanna highlight that because, um, I remember, and this was several years ago when I was homeschooling my kids, and I was trying to help my daughter with a logic lesson that she was working on. I had never studied logic. I didn't really know that much about it. And so I sat down with her lesson book and I looked at what she was learning, and literally a different way of explaining it dropped into my head.
Oh my gosh.
And I was just sitting there kind of stunned. I'm sure she didn't notice, she's a teenager, but I was just sitting there stunned, like, I don't even understand what I just read, and I just learned a different way to explain it so that she
Mhm.
could understand it, because she's not understanding what's printed here. And I want to highlight that because I think we discount the ability to understand things that we don't already understand.
Yeah.
And it's so and this has been really uh highlighted for me over the last, especially the last few years. So I appreciate you sharing that because it's so fascinating, isn't it?
It is fascinating. It's really incredible, and so, and I it's to me just a testament of God's love for us and the gift of our, like, when we're connected to God, we really truly can understand things that we had no prior conscious knowledge of. And
Mhm.
oh my gosh, there's just so many incredible things with that.
Yeah, and I would even suggest that you're being connected to your higher self, because
Yeah.
music is who you are. Like,
Mhm.
that sound is who you are. This is even share how you tell people what your name, how to remember your name. I love it.
It's like recital, just without the re. So it's like, I mean, my name is from Fiddler on the Roof. It's from a musical. And the way I explain it is through music. It's like music really is such a huge part of who I am in my daily life. Like I say, if my life could actually be a musical, I would be so thrilled.
I I think it is. I think it already is. I'm curious about how you got interested in astrology, how that all came to play. I know for me, growing up, I was always curious about astrology, but I was kind of brought up to believe that, oh, that's, don't get close to that. That's weird. That's just nonsense.
Yep.
It's, or even it's of the devil, or something like that. And that's kind of kind of what I heard growing up. And of course, since then, I have learned differently and have studied human design and astrology and all of that, which is how we got connected. So share a little bit about that journey for you, like what you're Did you have those thoughts too early on? How did you, or were you always open to it?
I've I've been curious by nature, just like if something comes into my existence, like my awareness, then I'm curious about it. Like it just is, which my astrology, like I'm a Gemini sun. Geminis are naturally curious beings. They want to gather information. They're typically not judgmental about something because they're just curious, you know? And so I am curious by nature, so I'm pretty open-minded. But when it came to astrology, I have a lot of good friends that are very are professional astrologers, and I saw them doing their thing, and I was just like, astrology is a fad, and I am never really going to have anything to do with it. I don't have an interest to learn it. I don't care about it. Like, you do your thing, I'll do my thing, and we can be friends, but I just really I don't I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's good. I think it's a flash in the pan. And then
What 5,000-year-old flash in the pan, right? I'm
yeah,
kind of I'm
exactly.
kind of laughing about that flash in the pan idea, but yeah, it's kind of like this energy of you do your thing, I'll do mine.
Yeah, yeah, but I really just thought, oh, like I'm starting to see it everywhere. And instead of being like, oh, maybe that's God showing me the path I might go down, I was like, oh, that's just so hot now, but it's going to be so like, it's going to be like tight rolling your jeans in the 90s. You remember like late 80s, like it's so was a fad for just like a short time. Now it's coming back. So it's like, yeah, it's big now. It's totally going to be gone in a little while. Um, and so I dismissed it. And then I took a business course. And in the business course, she required us to learn astrology so that we could read our natal chart, um, and really see what we were designed to do for people.
Well, let me back up just a second because you said natal chart. So what does that mean
Okay.
for those
So,
that aren't familiar with
yeah,
astrology?
great question. So, a natal chart, so everybody knows like what your sun sign is, like where the sun was in the sky when you were born, right? Gemini, Cancer, whatever. A natal chart is basically a map of where everything was in the sky at the moment you were born. And for me, it really it's a map for the soul. So when I first started getting into astrology and I was like, okay, God, is this like a real thing? And is this something that you really want me to do? He sent me a song. So I'm really glad we talked about that. And it's a Christian song. I can't remember the name of it, but it says in the song, I put every star into place so that you would remember my name.
Mm,
And I'm like goosebumps gonna cry right now. As I heard the song that day, I didn't hear so that you would remember my name. I heard him say, I put every star into place so that you would remember your name, so that you
mm,
would remember who I designed you to be. And I just started bawling.
mm.
And I was like, I know who he is. I know who he is. And I've spent so much time developing my relationship with him. It's me. Like, it's me that I have a hard time remembering. And it's me that I have a hard time reconnecting back to who I really am. And so to have this map where I can be like, okay, this is actually who I am in this beautiful, light, powerful way. This is who God designed me to be.
I love that. One of the ways that I've looked at it, and I don't know how, how you would think about this, but I really believe that we came down here with a soul plan that we designed, that we helped design, that we were consulted on, that we studied, that we were trained on, and so forth. And it's the big things. It's not like the everyday things, but it's kind of the bigger things that we're going to do in our life, and some of the bigger moments of our life that we kind of designed for our own life lessons. And through the miracle of what this universe is, of what God is, of the heavenly divine orchestration of it all, we come down and are born at a specific moment that gives us the energies, that gives us the power, that gives us um, the overlay that helps us in what we've designed.
Yes.
And I love that so much.
Yep.
And honestly, if I had looked at, like I said, I'd always been interested in astrology, but I spent a couple of years studying human design, and then that brought me back to astrology again. So then I started studying astrology. And one of the things that was interesting for me was I feel like I wouldn't have I wouldn't have connected with my astrology 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the way I connect to it now.
Yeah. Yep.
Because I've been able to see the history of my life and I can see all of that in my chart. And yet I look at it and I go, what if I'd had this 20, 30, 40 years ago? So I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. It's
I amen to the, like, if I had this, like, my daughter, she'll be like, okay, can we talk astrology? And I'm like, yep. And it's so fun because, so this is like, oh, I just have two things that I want to share. Uh, she'll ask me questions that have nothing to do with astrology. So, like the other day, she's like, I'm feeling really stressed about this, like, I'm feeling overwhelmed about this particular thing. How can I address it differently? And so I went to her natal chart and I listened to the chart itself. And I'm like, I say I'm listening to the chart, but I'm really listening to God through the chart, right? I'm like reading her and like listening to that. And like pinpoint in seconds, I heard exactly the message that she needed. And she just started crying and she's like, I felt so called out. And we know every time she knows every time we're going to talk about her chart, like she needs to be in a place where she can express emotion because it always resonates and then the tears come. But one of the things like I love that you said, where you had talked about like creating this life plan before we got here and the energies helping us. Like we came down in the moment so that those energies could help us. I really amen and amen to that. And I tell people all the time, I see two or three witnesses of the exact same thing in a natal chart. Um, and to me, that's a sign that God has given us multiple ways of support, multiple avenues of support for that one thing that we're needing to do.
I love that.
And it's profoundly helpful because I think a lot of times we're like, I feel so alone or I really can't do this. And then we look at the chart and I'm like, no, like this here is saying you can do this and you have support from this angle. And this over here is saying you really can do this and it has support from this angle. And then you have this third thing in there that's just so big and like, you can do this, And sometimes we just need the confidence and the knowledge that we can do it. And then like the little tools to put it into application. And so I just feel like that all comes together to really help us like complete the tasks that we wanted to do down here.
I totally agree with you. And the interesting thing is that we have so much support from so many different directions, right? We have God support, we have angel support, we have support from the whole universe has gathered to give us support to be here in this moment to do what we came here to do. It's astounding. It's
It is.
absolutely astounding. I one of the things that I have noticed as I have helped people, through astrology, when is that some people look at their some of the things they don't like about themselves, or they look at their chart and they go, "Oh, this is a difficult issue in my chart," and I find a lot of times people will read the chart as almost a doomsday type
Yeah.
energy with it, like,
Yep.
"Oh my gosh, look, I'm gonna have all these problems because this is where this is, and this is where this is, and there's this conflict here." And I tend to look at it a little differently. I tend to look at it as this is all here to love and support us. It's all here. So even the conflicts that we might see within the chart, even the opposition or the aspects that seem less favorable are actually for our greater good. What are
Yep.
your thoughts about that?
Amen and amen to what you said. If I'm an astrologer, I've really listened to my chart. And it's also really helpful to see another astrologer because I can only see what I can see. I can only hear what I can hear. Do you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so I went and I saw her, and she was recommended to me. It was an incredible session, and she's not a follower of God. Like God is not in her vocabulary, which is fine. But she was more of like that kind of an astrologer where it was like, oh yeah, this is something you're gonna struggle with, and like, she gave me some things that I could do to like activate it, like you just need to wear purple all the time, and while that, like, it can be an outward reminder to me. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
To me, those things in our chart that would like look bad or would be hard or like, oh, this is going to be so awful, that's an opportunity for me to go to God and say, okay, this is a weakness. I'm glad I can see that it's a struggle for me. Now, how do I make this a strength?
But don't you find that the actual answer to how to make that a strength is also there?
Yes, it is absolutely also there.
Because I could look at and I'm trying really hard to not geek out and talk actual planets and all of that stuff because I wanna say my Chiron is next to my all that stuff, and people will go like, "What in the world are they talking about?" Which is totally fine, but just, I have I have things that, you know, the planets or the aspects that people think of as benevolent, and then there's others that people think of as not so great,
Yeah.
and I have so many of those things that are up against each other.
Yep.
So I can either look at it as I'm all my good aspects are being overtaken by the challenging aspects, or I can look at it as the challenging aspects are being lovingly brought to me with this support.
Yep. Yeah,
So there's just two
absolutely.
different ways of looking at it. I do want to talk about, so you talk about hearing the sound or the authentic sound of someone being in the chart, and I do want to talk about where you see that.
Okay, so that was another like really weird thing that happened to me.
I love it.
I was like sitting in the car one day. I had I was new to astrology, like really new. Like, this is another example of like, I should not have had this information at this stage in my learning. Like, I should not have had that understanding. So I'm sitting in the car and I was like, okay, if I were to like want to sing on stage, which I don't really, but if I were, God, what would be like the ideal songs for me to sing? And I'm like flipping through my phone, and then I just heard, look at where your moon is in your chart. And I was like, that's weird. Like, what? And I started playing with it. So I messaged a couple of people that I was really familiar with, like is safe to be a weirdo with, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I was like, okay, I'm wondering about this thing, and I think this might actually be a thing that I could hear the sound of the moon. And if you're like connected to your moon sound, and they started talking to me, and if they were, I would get an immediate reaction in my body.
Mm,
And I could feel the alignment, like it was like electricity going through my body. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I reached out to my business mentor and I was like, so this thing is happening. And she's like, can you hear the sound of the moon in people's voices? And I was like, I think so. but also I have no idea what I'm saying.
I can, but it's accidental.
I don't know. I think so, but I don't know how to how to on purpose this. And so I just started messaging. I put out a call on Facebook. I was like, I need some help. I need to know if I can actually do this. And which is probably not the ideal business practice. Because you want to come across as an expert. And I was like, I don't know if I'm doing this right. And I kind of want to check it out. So well, people who would be willing to just send me a voice message so I could listen to your voice and see if you're in your sound or not. And again, it really was because I knew nothing. I knew nothing. And so it really was about asking God, what does it sound like when someone's in Gemini? What does it sound like when someone's in Cancer and at Scorpio? What is that experience? And because I had been cultivating my gift of hearing for 10 years prior to that, they would message me and I'd be just like, oh, they're in. And it was just like boom. And I got images for each one of the signs. I got information for what each sign does, what each sound does in that sign. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And I was just kind of like, okay, maybe I should take an astrology class. So I did a certification and didn't understand a bunch of things because astrology is a language and it really does take a lot of practice.
Mhm.
And so I was like, okay, I kind of get it, but I only understand it enough to get myself in trouble. I certified somehow by the grace of God. I feel like it was by the grace of God that I certified. And then I just was like, what if a friend of mine was like, what if you just started listening to the planets? And I was like, well, that's a novel idea. And so I did, and it just it exploded.
Yeah, that's amazing. I just recently you started a class called remind me Sound of the Signs or
Yeah, the sound
something
of the
like that.
signs.
And I'm in your class and we've only done 2 of the I think it's 12 weeks if
Mhm.
I'm correct. Yeah. And so you're going through each astrological sign and talking about the sound of that sign and 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 different aspects of that. And it has been remarkable. And I think this is the beauty of of receiving from different people, from different viewpoints, different understandings. And it opened because I've studied astrology. I know I can sit here and talk about aspects and planets and houses and all the stuff.
Yep.
But your approach is so unique and beautiful. And I actually had just messaged you yesterday because I got on a call with a friend and we do some similar work in the energy field and she was really struggling and I thought the answer is in her chart. I just knew it in that moment that and it's so interesting because I the way that I work is I have all these different things. And then when I'm meeting with somebody, I will hear I need to go to their chart, or I need to go to their human design chart, or I need to go to their astrology chart, or I need to go somewhere else. So I'm just kind of like pulling from whatever direction I feel pulled to. But when before we even pulled up her chart, I was like, I bet you anything that her Taurus is in the 11th house. I mean, I just knew it from what we had talked about the day before. And sure enough, we pulled it up and there it was. And there was the dilemma and there was the solution.
Mhm,
Because we can see the challenge of it
mhm.
because there's always that aspect of um we can I'm trying to think of another analogy like I'm just going to use this as an analogy. It might not be the best, but like a person can be a teacher. Let's say they're a third grade teacher and they can be a third grade teacher who loves their students, or they can be a third grade teacher that is not happy to be there. And
Yep,
it's a totally different thing, but they're both teachers.
yep.
So two different people can be a Gemini sun and be expressing that either on the what we might say the
I
positive or the light
Yep,
side versus the shadow or the negative side.
yep.
And so that's where we can see the issue and we can see moving from okay, I'm expressing this from the shadow side. How can I move to the light side of it? So I just love what you do. I had so many ahas in your class just in the last 2 weeks. I've always struggled, honestly, to connect to my Taurus sun. I have a huge stellium in Gemini, which is why I get you. Um, and so I feel that energy a lot.
Yeah,
And so it's quite interesting, and I know and I'm getting into the, like,
the nitty-gritty.
nitty-gritty, and there might be people listening going, "What in the world language are we talking here?" So, I'm curious how this has one of the things I love about these conversations is because everybody has their unique experiences. And it's in learning about other people's experiences that we start to understand our own experiences.
Mhm.
And there's a few things that you mentioned that I just love. First of all, is the things coming up several times and you're like, okay, I'll look at it. The second thing I love about your story is God told me this. And so you test it. It's not, it's not like, oh, God told me this, and so I'm gonna go the other direction. It's like, okay, he said to say this. Are we sure? Okay, we're gonna do it. And then you see the benefit of doing that. How has this path or astrology or any part of this, how has this blessed your life?
Uh, oh my
The big
gosh,
question.
that is a big question. Um, well, there's just a lot of different ways. Like I think about how much it's helped me understand my family members and how much it's helped me share with my daughter who she is, you know. She's the one of my kids. The other ones are in their 20s. They're not quite ready to talk about it yet, which is totally good. But she just wants to soak it all up. And so, and I think, earlier you had said, what if I had this information like 20 years ago? I think, man, she's 15. Like, what if I had had this information at 15? Like, I'm able to share with her exactly how she needs to do her money that's in alignment for her, not what all of the other money people might say that she needs to do, but like how she can spend so she's in alignment and so that she feels good, and how she can like really direct her money and work with it. And so that has just been like uh it's been a huge source of connection for her and I. And it's been so wonderful to be, as a mother, to be able to know that I can hear the correct advice for her and not give her something that will, because sometimes we don't know, we're moms and we think we are giving them the right thing. And then we find out a few years later that it was like actually not helpful. I don't know if you've ever had that happen, but I have definitely had that happen with my boys and with her. But with astrology, and when she's willing to listen, that has, I felt more confident giving her advice because I know it's tailored to her. So that's been like in my personal world. In my business world, um it's helped me understand, like there's an, and I'm not going to get into the verbiage of it, but there's a way for me to understand where my business is headed every month, what I need to do every day to get to that place that I'm going, and how to create expansion in my business. And I'm using astrology to do that. And not only am I using astrology to do that, but I'm combining it with conversations with God about astrology. And so he's then able to like, the more he told me this one time, he said, the more you learn and the more you understand, the greater ability I have to converse with you, because now I have more avenues to talk to you through and
Mm,
more ways to help you understand these questions, like give you the answers to these questions that you have. And so I will be talking to him about something and he will talk back to me and he will use astrology. And I'm
Mm,
like, well, I didn't see that or I didn't understand that. So through these conversations with him, he's helping me better understand myself, even when I'm not necessarily taking astrology to him and saying, I don't understand this part of my chart, or I don't understand this thing. But he's like, okay, this is how it works. And actually, if you utilize this, and like, this is how you can use it in your business, and this is where your business is headed. And this is a strength of yours, and this is a strength that you have that you're bringing to your husband, and this is the strength that your husband's bringing to you, and how you are interacting. It's just pretty much everywhere.
that's beautiful. One of the things that is really highlighted for me in this type of work, and I'm wondering what your experience has been, is just how unique we all are and the importance of us being in our authenticity. It's not everybody that wants to do a podcast like I'm doing. It's not everybody that wants to talk astrology. It's
Yeah.
not everybody that wants to be a doctor or a teacher, or and it's sometimes we just want everybody to be just like us, and we get frustrated when everybody it doesn't get what we get, don't think the way I think, so they must be wrong. And yet I one of the things that's so apparent in any of these beautiful tools that have been given to us is how different we all are, and that it's part of the design. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it is definitely part of our design, and it really is part of like who we are. And oh gosh, I just think, whether someone's into astrology or not, or whether somebody like gets physics or not, like I do not get physics. And my son he watches physics videos for fun on YouTube. And I'm like, what? Like, that doesn't even make any sense to me. But all of that, like, that's why we need a community. That's why God didn't send us down. Like I've said this before. If I was on an island by myself, I'd be perfect. I just be perfect. It's everybody else in my life that's messing it up. Just kidding, mostly. But it but it's that everybody else is just really showing us like they're adding things to us. And so what we bring to the table, whether we believe in astrology or not, it shows up. Like, I don't know, I was just thinking, you could not believe in the wind, but you can see the effects.
Right,
you
right.
know Whether you believe in it or not, it's still there, and it still is creating an impact on our life. And and I think it's beautiful that we have our own purposes, regardless of what that is, astrology or not, physics or not physics. Like, I think I'm still a great person, even though I don't understand physics. I think, my neighbor is still a great person, even though she thinks astrology is weird. Like,
It's
it's
so
just,
funny that you bring up physics because my brother's a physicist, so I lived that experience. I lived that experience too. Yeah, it's really remarkable, and it's really a beautiful experience when we can look around and say, "I'm so grateful for the people who are physicists because we have all of this modern technology and information and ability to fly and all of that because there's somebody that's willing and
yeah.
interested in that, and we have food to eat because there's someone that's willing to grow that food and interested in that, and we have just everything that we look around and see is because somebody had a passion for that experience, and now we are the beneficiary. What's the correct word for that? benefit
Yeah.
from it. I'm just gonna say that.
Yeah, the
Uh,
beneficiary of it, yeah. That
yeah.
now you say all of that, and I'm like, "Okay, maybe I don't wanna live on an island by myself because I am not passionate about farming. Not
Exactly.
I'm not passionate about irrigation
Exactly. So I
or
just
woodwork or anything like that.
yeah.
I would I would probably not make it very long."
No, no, it's a beautiful thing. I'm wondering, and I know you have some practices that you use to stay connected to your spirit, to stay connected to the spiritual side of you. Can you share some of the things that you do maybe on a daily or weekly basis that helps you?
Yeah, I the first thing I do, and this is daily, so is I actually wake up with a very intentional playlist. So I don't press snooze. Um, I put my headphones in and I turn on my wake up playlist. And my wake up playlist, like the very first song on my list, is a non lyrical song. That it's a gentle instrumental song to help bring me back into my body, so to speak, to kind of help waken my body up. I tried everything. I tried like I remember reading this book. She's like, just count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then just do it at one. And I'd be like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then I just stay in bed, and I wouldn't do it. And you know, it might seem weird to say this, but God told me to do this. He said you need to wake up with a playlist. I was like, okay, so how do I do this? So the very first song is a non-lyrical song. The second song is my intention for the month. So I set an intention for each month, and then I set an intention for the quarter. So for that 3 months. And so the following two songs do have lyrics, and they are songs that remind me of my intention for that month and then remind me of my intention for that quarter. So first song helps me bring my body, my mind and body back awake. The second song reminds me of one of those two intentions. And then as soon as the third song starts, that's my cue to get out of bed. And so
Mm,
it's almost like a natural snooze, but not a snooze. It's just like this way to gently bring myself awake. And then as I'm gathering everything to get ready for the day, I'm listening to that third song, and it just really helps me be more intentional and reminds me why I'm getting out of bed and what I'm doing, and helps me keep my focus. And then sometimes I hear the songs during the day, sometimes I don't, but at least it's the beginning, like it marks that beginning to set me on that path. And then I sit down with God first thing and I journal with him. And like I write to him and then I go to the scriptures. I get a message from the scriptures. So my pattern is write, inspire, receive.
mm,
And so I write to God, I read an inspiration, and then I receive from God. And that inspiration piece kind of um, helps me transition from my voice to his voice, because sometimes I can like I give God his lines and I tell him what I think he should say to me back. Sometimes it's not always nice to me. In fact, I know that I've given God his lines when what he's saying back to me is like very chit 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 chit, like on a chopping block kind of thing. So that has also been really helpful. Um and then I meet with Jesus every day. He's my vice president. So I meet with him every day, like when I very first thing when I start my business day after my daughter's at school, I sit down and I have a meeting with Jesus and we plan out the day. And then I do the same thing because God's my CEO. I'll do the same thing once a week. So once a week I meet with God for business. Every day I meet with him for my real life. And then every day I meet with Jesus and we talk about implementing the thing that God gave us direction for the week.
wow. Wow.
It
Yeah.
seems like a lot, but it actually goes by fast.
Well, and I'm curious because I could just hear the questions that people are asking right now, and they're like, "What does that mean to meet with Jesus?"
Yeah, so that same process that I do in the morning with my journaling, write, inspire, receive, I do that same thing with Jesus. So I address Jesus differently than I address God. just so that I can have that distinction. And it is a different relationship. It's a totally different relationship, right? So when I address Jesus, I'm like, "Hey, Jesus." And he's like, "Hey, Cytel." Like when he talks back, it's a little bit more relaxed. But yeah, I just write, "Hey, Jesus," and then I write. And I literally, for all my journaling, I will set a timer. So it's 5 minutes of writing to God, 5 minutes inspiration. Like I randomly open a scripture, point to it. I write that scripture down, and then I write anything that comes to my mind about that scripture in regards to what I wrote. So I do that for 5 minutes, and then I receive from either God or Jesus for 5 minutes. And then they sign their name, of course. Tell me they love me. They tell me they love me every day.
That's
But
beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, it's
And
been,
I love the distinction that you just pointed out, that if I'm getting messages like do this, do that, do this, then I'm like, okay, that's my voice
yeah,
talking. And that is so true. I often share with people when we're connecting with our angels, when we're connecting with our spirit guides, they're giving us messages like calling us names and things. That is not
yeah,
them.
yeah,
It's pure love, it's pure grace, it's pure just peace, and just this tremendous, tremendous energy of love. Doesn't mean that we can't be corrected, but we're corrected in a very loving way.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
You share that, and the thing that comes to my mind is I've witnessed conversations, and I really don't think that this has anything to do with my gift of hearing. I've witnessed conversations, and one person's saying one thing, and the other person is hearing something completely different. And I'm like, I'm not sure how you got that from what they said, because that isn't at all. You're nodding your head, so you know what I'm talking about. Like, that is not at all what they said. Like, we hear what we want to hear, we see what we want to see. And sometimes that's the case with God. Like, when we are listening, because a prayer, so often in prayer, we don't stop and take the time to listen after we speak. It's just like, it's like calling a friend and being like, okay, I'm done talking, and then hanging up. But with the journaling, it really is an opportunity for me to like stop and let God to talk back to me. But again, it's a process to learn what his voice is versus what I think he's telling me, or what I think he should say to me. And that's a development of a relationship, just like any other relationship. It's no
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, for sure. And it is. It's a development. It's a process to get to that point, and I just love that you shared all that. So, will you please share where people can find you, where they can look you up, where they can follow you, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so if they go to www.soulsound.co, that's my website. I'm on Facebook. Soul Sound with Cytel Schults is my Facebook group, so you can come join that. That one's free. I've got some free resources on my website. I've also got a YouTube channel. If you just search by my name, Cytel Schults, I will pull it up, and I share a ton of information on astrology for free there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you visiting with us today.
Thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
Mhm.